Testing, testing. Turn this up. Hello, hello. Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay, great, great. So we're going to get started, everyone. We're going to get started. So first of all, thank you so much for coming. This is a very exciting event for us. This is our last day of our Animal Law Week. And so again, thank you so much for coming. Well, first of all, my name is Ella. So my name is Ella. I am one of the, I'm a part of the exec board, one of the president of the Animal Law Society, and am joined by Craig Watts, who I'll introduce in a second, and Amanda Hitt. And again, this is a very exciting event that we're putting on today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. So this is a full disclosure event. So poultry farmer Craig Watts is going to speak out on the potential policy collapse and evolving threats to American farmers. So introducing Craig Watts. So Craig Watts was a former Purdue chicken farmer for one of the largest poultry producers in our country, which is Purdue. He blew the whistle on the poultry industry, revealing what it really looks like inside the Purdue Farms chicken breeding houses. Again, former contract grower. He was spotlighted by the New York Times, Vox, Vice, Business Insider, and other publications, sharing his experiences as a contract grower for Purdue. And to note, he was one of the top growers, I might add, of one of the chicken farm of Purdue. So he has a lot of experiences to share with us. And then we have Amanda Hitt. So Amanda's a visiting fellow, or was a visiting fellow, or is, with the Brooks McCormick Jr. Animal Law, policy program, always in our hearts. She's been a champion and visionary for protecting and empowering food system whistleblowers for over a decade. And prior to her fellowship with ALPP, was the founder and director of the Food Integrity Campaign at the Government Accountability Project. His clients have included USDA food safety inspectors and ultra-high-speed slaughterhouses, contract poultry farmers faced with exploitative contracts and company retaliation, and animal researchers privy to taxpayer-funded waste and cruelty. In addition to litigating whistleblowers' cases, Amanda and her team has worked to draw public attention to these whistleblower stories, whistleblowers like Craig, and to turn their revelations into food system and legal reforms. Hitt's clients come from varied economic sectors and backgrounds, from factory workers to CEOs, and through assisting her clients, she's learned firsthand the importance of bringing diverse voices together to create meaningful change. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Amanda and Craig.
Okay, good. All right, we're getting started. Thank you so much for having me here for this final panel in Animal Law Week, which is my second inaugural Animal Law Week. I started it off last time, so I'm finishing it this time. And it's a great pleasure to be joined by Craig Watts here. I want to just sort of set the stage a little bit about what it is we'll be discussing today. First, learning a little bit about Craig and his whistleblower journey, and ultimately what brought him into advocacy and the incredible work that he does currently helping chicken farmers. Also, to try to bring the focus in on not just about the great things that were, but the challenges that we have today, right now, in this rapidly changing world. So with that, I'll get us started. It's obviously pretty clear. We know each other. But I was hoping that you'd tell us a little bit about what it was that brought us together.
First of all, I just wanted y'all to know in 1984, I sent a transcript to Harvard to get admitted, and never heard anything back. And so I'm going to check that dean while I'm here. But as far as Amanda and I meeting, my gosh, I've been doing advocacy for farmers in one capacity or another for a long time. But I had met a reporter, and we were doing an article together. It's called about antibiotics in chicken feed, or as they were going to no antibiotic program at that time. A lot of the companies were. Anyway, I gave him some documents. There were fee tickets and some service reports, things that people on the outside looking in never saw. And so he didn't know what to do with it, and so he called this lady, and she called her the chicken expert, and she worked with an organization called Compassion World Farming. Well, when she sat down and looked at the document, she knew what he had. She knew he had the Holy Grail. The inside of a poultry farm, like behind this iron door, you just didn't get inside of it. So she and I kind of struck up a relationship and wound up filming a short YouTube, and I just basically opened the doors and let her and her filmmaker in. It wasn't undercover footage, it wasn't grainy footage, it was a farmer and an animal rights activist walking into an industrial poultry farm, asking me anything you want to ask me. And it made a 5-minute YouTube, and it got in the New York Times. And then it kept getting buffed up with the Reddit board. And to say that my life changed would be an understatement of a lifetime, but it was along those same lines. She had screamed that to her husband. He said, "That guy's going to be Mark." And so, enter Amanda Hitt. And Amanda kind of took me in her little program, and we filed a complaint under the Whistleblower Act, the Food Safety Modernization Act, I believe. And everybody told her it couldn't be done, but I'm here because Amanda Hitt has dug her heels in and said, yes, it can be done. We're still fighting with that case to this day. We crossed some hurdles that people said we couldn't cross. So, so that's kind of how you and I met, and appreciate you hanging in there and doing what you did for me, yeah.
Yeah, it was a struggle. It was not because of the law, but because it's often difficult to deal with. But for the folks here that are hoping to hear about why the prices are so high, let's explain a little bit about contract poultry production, broiler production, and what it is that you did for free.
Well, I mean, the idea is the egg prices now, but what I did was totally different. We raised birds for meat. Avian influenza can get in those farms, but the replacement cycle is so quick, it's not quite a hit like you see with the egg farms. And what I did is I went out and I borrowed a bunch of money, and I built some houses to the company specifications. The barns were 40 by 500, there were 4 of them. I housed 120,000 chickens at each flock. I did that 6 times a year, so I raised 720,000 birds a year, about 3 million pounds, excuse me. Basically, I owned the buildings, I owned the land, I hired the help, I paid the insurance, I paid property tax, yada yada. And the company owned the birds, the company owned the feed, the vaccination programs. They would actually deliver the chicks. I didn't own them, they were more of a consignment. And then at the end of the flock, they would come remove them and carry to the processing plant, and I would get the houses ready for the next flock, and we start all over again. If you saw the John Oliver piece about chicken farming, he put it as well as I think he could put it. Everything that costs money, the farmer owns, and everything that makes money, the company owns. That's for production in a nutshell.
So let me go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said you purchased a bunch of these high capacity barns, CAFOs. Could you explain to this group a little bit more about what kind of money we're talking about?
Well, at the time, I mean, this was 1992, and the barns cost $100,000 a piece. So when it's all said and done, I had a little over $400,000 invested. And like I said, that was 1992. Those same buildings today would cost about $350,000 a piece to build. So that's the kind of money we're talking about. $500,000 to me at 25 years old, and I didn't have a pot, when to throw it out of. I mean, that was like this insurmountable debt, I thought, but I had enough faith in myself that I was going to make it work.
So you see, to be clear, Craig continues to work with contract growers today. What would you say the average debt load of a contract grower is?
Oh gosh, the farms are getting, the houses are getting bigger. They're not 40 by 500 anymore. They're more like 60 by 600. Like I said, instead of 100,000, they're 350 to 400,000. $2 million easy. My 4 barns will be a tiny farm today. I mean, they're 8, 16, 24. We even had some in our county that are 48 barns, so that would be like $12 million.
Right. So where's the farmer going to get that kind of money?
Well, the FSA, so weird. Acronym. Farm Service Station. Well, the first place you go is you go to your commercial lender. And and generally, if you walk in there with a chicken contract, they will turn you down. Well, there is a deal with Farm Service Agency where they are the lender of last resort. They generally will execute loans on these chicken contracts. The FSA caps out at 1.75 million, and that was good enough for a long time, but now the farms are so big now that they started tapping into SBA loans. The SBA, I think the cap now is like $5 million. Well, there's some that are even exceeding that now. And now there's like some private money coming in and loaning money to these farms. I don't really know what the relationship is there, because you can't FOIA stuff like that. It's just, but it's there for sure.
So these farmers make lots of money and they're super rich and
To my knowledge, there's only been one study that's been done, and it was done by some folks down in Alabama, and they followed around chicken farmers for about like 15 years or something, and they collected every view and they tracked all the expenses and stuff. And what they found out was if they put in a unit for labor, and that unit being the minimum wage, whatever it was at that time, that 70% of the farmers actually had negative return on their equity. So if you just borrowed $2 million for less than a minimum wage job, that's what it boils down to. And then there is another study out there that says that 71% of chicken farmers solely raising chickens for income are living below the poverty line.
so if they're not making any money and they have to go under, right, declare bankruptcy, who's paying for those loans what happens with those loans?
Well, if it's an FSA guaranteed loan, or even an FSA direct loan or SBA guaranteed loan, when the SBA, the FSA, they don't guarantee the farmer, they're guaranteeing the bank. So if that farmer goes bankrupt, the FSA or the SBA will step in and pay that loan. So who's paying for that loan is you look to the left of you, and you look to the right of you. That's who's paying.
He's getting rich.
Well, there's a handful. The corporations are getting rich.
And there's, just to kind of explain the landscape of the chicken industry, how many firms are basically run, so you work for Purdue, but if, when I go to the grocery store, there's lots of different chickens labeled, all kinds of different chickens, but who's there? What's the market look like? What's the landscape look like?
Well, the measure that people use is the CR4, which is the concentration ratio of the four largest firms. Purdue, I think, is now number 4. Sanderson, Pilgrim's, and then Tyson will be at the top. So those 4 control 60% of the chicken market. But that's leaning toward anti-competitive, but it's not really a screaming monopoly. But the weird twist here is these companies have just settled lawsuits where they all get into a motel room together. They were colluding to fix prices for the consumers. They were colluding to suppress wages for the workers. They were colluding to fix payment for the farmers. So there really is no competition. That's what it boils down to.
And that's not just your thoughts about it, there's a private opinion. There were, in fact, court cases recently brought on these issues, right?
Yeah, of course, they settled them all, so they could do it again if they want to do it, yeah. It made millions of dollars in settlements, yeah.
And just very quickly, could you explain this concept of the tournament system that farmers must participate in, or mostly must participate in order to be a contract grower for one of these large firms?
The tournament system is this like Machiavellian kind of payment scheme. I heard the other day somebody calling Social Security was a Ponzi scheme, but that's not true, because the Ponzi scheme is made with intent to fraud. The current tournament system is a Ponzi scheme because this is meant to fraud. And what happens is, it's basically a competition. That firm, my case Purdue, there would be about 10 farmers that would all get chicks placed in a week. So when they remove those chicks, they would weigh them and they would compare it to how much feed they ate. So basically, the farmer who could get that chicken the fastest, the quickest, at a lower cost, would get a bonus. And if that other farmer, didn't get that chicken quite as fast as quick, he would actually get his pay deducted. They called it base pay in the contracts at 5 cents, just say 5 cents a pound. Well, base really meant average. There's no other place in the world where base means average except a chicken contract. And so the guys who got their pay deducted, that's how they paid the bonus to the ones at the top. So for the company, it was a zero-sum game. Problem with that, and it sounds great. I mean, you work hard, you work smarter, you should be rewarded, and I fully agree with that. The trouble here is like the variables that I explained before that are owned by the company, primarily chicks is the number one variable in how well that flock's going to do. You can't hatch out 12 million chicks in a week and they all have the same genetic potential. That's the only way a tournament system like this would work. And then there's also issues with the feed, but that's probably a lesser an issue than the chick quality. It's not just the genetic potential, it's just the health of the bird in general. She gets a healthy flock, and I get a flock that's not so healthy. Competition is competition. If she and I both line up at the same yard line and we run 40 yards, okay, the winner's the winner. But if she gets good chicks and I get bad chicks, well, I'm just backed up 10 yards. Can I beat her? Maybe, but probably not.
Right.
It's just an unfair system. And but it's been used for as long as I was in the business.
So I just wanted to be clear too. I know you mentioned that the animal rights group took video with your permission. You allowed them in barns. It wasn't an undercover investigation or anything of that nature. But because this is Animal Law Week, it would be good to sort of explain what it was that made you talk to this CIWF. What is it that you were seeing in your flocks and what was being portrayed on television?
I was sitting in a motel room in Brookings, South Dakota in June 2012, and I saw a Purdue commercial come on television. Me and my wife were there. We were doing some organizational training or something. I said, hey, can I look at this? Jim Purdue's on television. Because I've never seen one at home before. And so he's driving down the road and he's telling how good things are. And his daddy told him this, his daddy told him that. And then he walks inside that chicken house and it looks pristine. It looked like you had wiped the pans down with Armor All. Everything was shining. It was brand new pine shavings on market age birds that were feathered out, white and beautiful. They looked like they had a half an acre a piece to roam in, and excuse my French here, but my bullshit detectors went tick, 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 and literally that bothered me to the point I couldn't sleep at night. Because the USDA was coming in with this thing called process verification process, and you think, okay, good, third-party standards, they're going to separate, Purdue's going to separate itself from the pack. Well, the third parties, the USDA process verified was not independent standards. It was just Purdue was doing what Purdue said it was doing. Purdue could say, well, we turn our houses upside down before we put a flock of chickens in. If they did that, they just checked the box. That's all it was. So, and then the people who wrote those standards were the National Chicken Council, who are lobbyists from the industry. So it's not really that hard to adhere to. So it's a lot to do about nothing. It's the hoodwinking of the consumer, and quite frankly, it just pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I sat on that for like 2 years. And so that's, I was just to the point, enough's enough.
Enough's enough. Well, this group is probably interested in it as well. It's one of my first questions when you reach out for legal help. What are the environmental ramifications of having one of these CAFO operations, these broiler operations?
Well, there's two really, two main ones. The huge processing plant is going to accompany all the CAFOs that are built around it. Usually there's, I think in our area there were 100 CAFOs within a 60-mile radius of that processing plant. Well, that processing plant produces a lot of waste that goes into the water. I have had behind-the-door meetings with department heads of environmental people in certain states, not going to name it, and county commissioners in counties that are, quite frankly, not happy having these people set up because they violate continuously. They don't fix it, they just pay fines because it's cheaper to do it that way. So that's one thing. But the other thing is you have these 100 CAFOs in that 60-mile area, you've got so much soil and you've got so much nutrients. And if you get those many CAFOs within that 60-mile radius, there's going to be way more nutrients than that soil can ever uptake. And it's not economical to haul it 50, 100, 200 miles away. So I told her, man, like I say, is what the problem becomes, you got too much shit and not enough dirt. And if you want to look at, I think, prime example, look no further than Chesapeake Bay. They're now paying farmers, the government was at one time, I don't know anymore. They were paying farmers to haul that litter out of the watershed, because it is so sad, the Chesapeake Bay was in such dire strait.
So you got the government picking up failed loans, picking up the shit, all at the taxpayer's expense. So the question starts to become, how cheap is that chicken really? You know, like does that price really reflect the externalities? When the consumer is like, well, it's cheaper than steak, it's cheaper than pork, it's inexpensive. Is it really inexpensive in your mind?
When I got in, the reason I got into advocacy is one of my good friends that I was working with early on went to DC to talk about issues that chicken farmers were having with the contract, to testify, and basically beg Congress to help. And what he got when he got home was he got his contract pulled. I mean, he got his contract canceled. He had $1 million loan and no way to pay it just because he went up there and spoke to his elected representatives. And he wound up hanging himself in his barns. And to hell no, it's not cheap. It gets real quick.
Right. In the rural blight, of course, you know, you have the expense of these basically single-use farms that can do nothing else, so that the farmer's more or less stuck with it. I want to just bring this in because of the whistleblower component of today's talk. So that having gone over all of these things, it can set the stage for the question is, why more farmers like Craig just don't come forward? I think it's important to realize what he was saying about all of the inputs are controlled by the corporation. So a farmer making a fuss might receive lower quality inputs as a punishment. And I think the really big thing is this debt, right? Because you may not think about this, but you have to collateralize that debt, and that's often going to be your family farm and the land that your family owned. So pushing back against these companies is very dangerous. And Craig is unique because he had made a significant progress in repaying his loan at the point he started to go forward. But it certainly is not that way, I would say, for the vast majority of contract growers. It's just a lot more to risk. But the good news is that we've got it around 1985, people have been paying attention to this issue, and they have been working hard at trying for reforms. I think that the pen I'm going to drop on that is, though, if you're not paying attention, this is the kind of stuff you're going to lose. And I was talking to Craig earlier, and this is a shock and awe situation that we're in. Even a good friend of mine said, how could you go to Harvard and talk about chickens in a time like this? That is precisely the way this works. That is the play. It's when you get off of your single issues, when you start believing that what it is that you care most about doesn't matter, or it has less relevance. Let me promise you that while geopolitical events are very exciting, very scary, so are kitchen table events like we're about to discuss today in our for the remainder of the panel. So I want to talk about some of the things that have transpired in, I guess, since the early 90s, late 80s with advocacy work around contract growing. I mean, we've obviously gone over animal welfare, right, is an area that has experienced reform. We've experienced reform in hope in the area of dealings with the growers themselves, and also in the environment and all vis-a-vis the regulatory space. So we'll just go over a little bit about that. People say, this sounds really bad, there ought to be a law against it, and there is a law. It's just that it hasn't really been effectively implemented. And it wasn't until actually just this last administration, the Biden administration, that through a tremendous amount of effort, and people here in the room, Jennifer joining us here from Farm Aid, really excited to have you here. All our collective efforts, we were able to get some things past the finish line. There are a couple of rulemakings. I'm stressing this is a rulemaking, right? This doesn't come naturally without a regulatory apparatus. So if you're thinking about getting rid of regs, remember you're getting rid of rights. The first one is a rulemaking that very quickly dealt with the terms of the contract itself, what a grower could expect entering into this type of operation. Understand that many of these growers were fed a lie at the outset. They were told that they would be very wealthy and they would have generational wealth to pass these farms down to their children, and that it would be a lucrative deal. And in truth, as Craig mentioned, it's a fast track to below the poverty line for many of these people. So there was help there. Also, just explaining the terms of delivery and how many birds. You'd be shocked to know that at one point, contracts were contract to contract. Let's say you had $1.5 million on loans, but you could easily have that contract terminated. So through through the regulatory process, things have gotten a little bit better there. And the second part, which is where we come in with whistleblowers, is remember we're talking about retaliation, but I'd like to actually frame that as a culture of fear that's actually baked into the business model of contract growing. It's really exciting to be a part of that with my colleagues from many different nonprofits to try to make it wrong to do that, right? To make retaliation impermissible. So that's where we are. With that, and the tournament system is better explained through the first rule. So there have been some really great, some great progress, but I kind of want to frame this in, we can lose that. If you don't want, if an agency is not staffed or tasked to enforce, then don't expect it to happen. And now you've got, a bunch of regs that seemed like waste, but it was really, the only waste was a wasted opportunity to help America's farmers. And Craig, maybe we talked about the environment. Maybe you could share some of the updates and some of our advocacy work there.
Well, in 23 and 24 and in January 25, we did get those reforms for contracts that you're talking about. The USDA has a enforcement arm. It used to be Grains Inspection Packers and Stockyards Act, but that was moved to the Agriculture Marketing Services. It moved to AMS. They still have some regulatory authority. And look, I'm not a fan of any government, nor any other farm is. But it's like having March Madness without a referee on the court. It just doesn't work, right? It just gets out of hand very quickly. And the first couple of rules you talked about, one about the disclosure of the information that was being left out prior, they have to tell you things now that they didn't used to, and the one about the anti-retaliatory discrimination, they're pretty safe. We got one that's the fair competitive livestock and poultry markets, and that deals with that tournament system. And basically it says is, if your base pay is at 5 cents a pound, you can't go and rob Peter and pay Paul. You got to pay him for 5 cents a pound, or you can give him a bonus if you want to. That's what that rule says. And they do another little thing is they're always constantly making you upgrade your facilities, even though you built them initially to the integrated specs. There's never been any kind of cost and benefit analysis for that. It's like, do it or you don't get any more chickens. So they now have to kind of disclose like what kind of return a grower can expect. But maybe I need to back up here a second. I know you all sit there thinking, why in the world would somebody sign that? Yeah. There's case studies there for sure, but and I work with farmers all the time, and there's probably as many stories as there are farmers of why. And I can tell you why I did. In 1991, I got a chance. I was working with a agriculture pesticide research facility, and I got a chance to come back and do work in North Carolina. I was flying all over the country, and I got to come back to my farm, and I really got the bug to stay. A row crop operation just was not doable at that time. I didn't have $2 million to invest in any equipment to start a row crop operation. It was at that exact moment that chicken companies came into our area and were recruiting farmers to build houses. I thought, wow, I've got agriculture experience, I've got a business degree, I hate a suit and tie, this is a perfect fit. And it didn't take me long, maybe a couple of years to figure out, oh Lord. But for me, at that moment in time in August of 1992, My desire to get back to the farm, just I had eaten up with confirmation bias. I just saw things the way I wanted to see them. There were red flags all around me. I just ignored them. And then once you sign that contract, you might even like the person. It might be good. At that time, they could change it at any time for any reason. And they say, hey, we're going to change it to from 5 cents a pound to 4 cents a pound. Here's your contract. You want to bring chickens? They'll let it to your truck. Got to point it and read them when they're pointing it.
Yeah, it's interesting that, all of these issues are tied up into it, and you think of it systemically, right? And you look at the big picture, and I think one of the things people, when we look at these problems, these societal issues, and thinking about creating policy, I think it's important to understand the state of rural America. Maybe Jennifer, you might be helping. What was it? How many people in the United States identify as a farmer?
Just short of 2%, I think.
And that's down. It's say 1925. We'd say what, probably 70%.
Right.
Of Americans identified as being a farmer producer. So we're looking at a rapidly changing landscape, and it's in that landscape that this type of abuse happens. If you're really interested, you could also note that you can see the cigarette companies moving out and chicken companies moving in, right? So it's a pretty interesting connection there. I want, especially for this group, Craig. We need to get real serious about what's happened to make the lives of these chickens better, because that's a piece of this larger thing, and this is a piece that, quite frankly, everyone who eats plays a part in. So, you had this video. Must have really upset Purdue. They seemed upset. What they do, I'm sure. I mean, they obviously made the lives of chickens better.
You asking me or telling me?
I'm working for Purdue now. Yeah, you know what you have to say. Keep your farm.
Well, I can say this as far as animal care. We did cause them a lot of change. They spent a lot more money on PR to convince you that they're changing their animal care. At the end of the day, the folks that are still raising Purdue birds in my area are doing the same thing I was doing when I left in 2016. Anything they have done, and they have this big animal welfare summit up on the shore every year, and it's just all dog and pony. At the end of the day, it's a little window dressing. We cut the density 0.00001%, so they got more room to move now. What good is it to give a bird an extra square foot when he can't even stand up and walk? That's your root of your problem. It's that Franken chicken genetically bred to eat and grow and be docile, stand up, take a bite, take a drink, sit back down. That's the root of the problem. Everything else they have done is just hacking branches. Branches grow back. You have got to get the root, and if you don't do that, nothing's. And even the organic products.
What?
Yeah. They have not moved the needle much from the conventional commercial house. I mean, it's if you even look at commercials where Jim Perdue and his sons are walking around they always do their commercials with the organic farm. It's a nice little pasture outside the house and looks good. And they'll be like one bird here, one bird there, one bird way over here, but yet there's like 25,000 still crammed in that house like this. So that's, it's deceptive, I guess, would be the understatement.
Yeah, and just to kind of put a fine point on that, I mean, those chickens are in there on their own volition. They could walk out in some of these organic farms, but they don't. Because they have 6 weeks to grow to full capacity and they're genetically bred to do so, and they're going to stay right by those feed lines and right by those water lines. Is that accurate?
Yeah, they've acclimated themselves where feeding water is. Why would they move?
Right, and they can't anyway, even if they could.
After a certain point in time, I call it 3 steps and flop. That's what they do.
So, but these people are at Harvard, and I think they probably shop at Whole Foods, so they get the higher welfare brands. And how's that work?
I mean, there are GAP certifications. I don't shop at Whole Foods.
Okay.
I'm not really sure what's on the shelf there,
Yeah.
but I know there are GAP certifications, and And you would have to get pretty high up on that scale to get to a legitimate pasture base.
But we know that these gap certifications are raced to the bottom, and everybody just gets to the absolute lowest level, and that's where they stick because they get the sticker. And as I like to explain it, every new label, every new certification is only an example of how they lied to you before on the last label. Because didn't you think that USDA label meant something? Did you think that they weren't doing that to the chickens? Did you think they weren't doing that to the environment? Did you think that the USDA was doing something? Let's have a new label. Let's go to organic. Let's you see, it just goes on and on and on.
The labeling was like that's where me and the animal rights person came together on. It was the labeling. It was the process verification. It wasn't really the video never was about animal welfare. It was about the consumer being lied to with the labels. If you look at that label, it says cage free, man, that sounds great. Well, there's not a meat bird in the United States of America raised in a cage. That's layers. So that is just absolutely much ado about nothing. And to be quite honest with you, if you walk in one of those houses when the birds are market age, you couldn't get a cage in there if you wanted to because they're in there this tight, right? Hormone free, that's in banned since the 50s. That means nothing. All natural, so it's plutonium. I don't even know what that means. It's just a lot of nothing.
I had such a deep thought. I was like, hey. So every single thing they do that says you as a consumer have to vote with your fork and make things better just helps them get richer.
Yeah.
So you're paying for the privilege of just getting to value signal to somebody that you have.
I mean, you look at that label and it just invites you in. It's all warm and fuzzy, and you got mom and pop's kettle and a nice white fence and a nice red barn. But that's not the reality, right? If you put on the label what I saw every Monday morning, they would sell one piece of chicken. Just FYI, I don't eat chicken anymore. Throw that out there.
Well, you make me rethink it. It sounds like a pretty bad job. Pretty bad situation. I'm kidding. Oh, we knew this, but so you talked about the Packers and Stockyards Act and how it's particularly vulnerable. Even though we've made these great strides, it requires constant attention. And I would say that the unifying sort of like the through line between the environmental movement, the animal protection movement, and farmer advocacy, it really comes down to we share a desire for greater transparency and accountability, and we're after the truth, and we appreciate speaking to people like you. I was just very curious to what about antibiotic-free should these? Presuming that most of you here, because of the nature of Animal Law Week, what should people understand about that?
Well, I mean, really, Chick-fil-A drove that. They drove all their suppliers to get to antibiotic-free so they could stand on the rooftop and shout, we're antibiotic-free. Now, what happened was that they weren't ready to start that no antibiotic ever program, and so the chickens were literally dying in the field. Like you can even look on the National Chicken Council website, and the mortality is much higher once they started those no antibiotics. So the supply chain was interrupted, and so now they're like, well, okay, now Chick-fil-A is saying it's okay to use ionophores, which are animal antibiotics. So they totally 180 on it. And then antibiotic-free does not mean pharmaceutical-free. We still got some drugs, we got antimicrobials that would mimic what the antibiotic did. So, I mean, there again, did they move the needle? Very much. So, I mean, and the whole thing is that they went to no antibiotic-free because of the pressure of antibiotic resistance in human medicine. So now they're patting themselves on the back saying, well, hey, look, we're no antibiotic ever now. Well, you caused the problem to start with, so now you're profiting off something that you set in motion many, many years ago because you used antibiotics subtherapeutic, which means a little bit in every bite of feed rather than judiciously when the birds are actually sick. And then another issue with antibiotics, no antibiotics ever, is now you get a flock of chickens that's sick in the field that an antibiotic would easily treat. They won't treat them. Because that sick chicken, antibiotic-free, is worth more than a healthy chicken that's had antibiotics. So there's that.
It's not another profit. They literally create the problem.
I've had them refuse to treat birds on my farm that were sick.
And I certainly have heard the same from other growers. Was there a little bit of time to wrap that? So I did want to, I hoped to have a little more time, but Craig, before we offer questions and answers, and what would be your call to action coming out of this? Is it just doom and gloom, and what are we supposed to do with all this information?
I mean, there's the old established standby, vote before, make personal choices, support a system you believe in, and that's a great choice for individuals. Fully on board with that. But we've got to get much bigger. We've got to think much more bigger. We've got to start thinking about policies, because our policies is what has ingrained this food system the way it is. We can have any food system we want if the policies support it, right? So what we want is something that protects our family farmers, something that strengthens conservation programs, which we're getting on the chopping block right now, and ensures us all access to healthy and affordable food. It can be done. I've done some tours around DC with the ASPCA and saw some smaller scale farms. A dairy with 120 head cattle, they were working it, and 2 families were living off that dairy. Out in Oregon, dairies may have 10,000 cattle. So don't tell me it can't be done. It's being done. It's just we have to get more farmers, but we have to have the policy in place to entice them or to incentivize them to move to a better system.
We need more eyes, and I think we need more cooperation with value-aligned people. You may personally not choose to eat meat or animal products, but I think you would agree that it is your taxpayer dollar, and that all of us are impacted with this. We certainly understand the ramifications of zoonotic disease transfer and the conditions in which these farmers are asked to keep these flocks. So we all have a stake in this. Either as a consumer or downstream, so it's really our problem to fix collectively. I think that's a nice segue. So again, I can't miss the opportunity to hand it to Jennifer, who heads Farm Aid, right, headquartered right here in Cambridge. I'm curious, as someone who represents the interests of so many farmers in the United States, could you add a little bit to that?
Sure. Thank you. Where to start? I think it's a great point about even if we don't eat meat, we are subsidizing the system. You talked a little bit about the loans. Farmers often get denied, poultry growers get denied then by the bank, but then the Farm Service Agency steps in and says, you know what, we'll guarantee that loan, and this is the only way the system works. We'll guarantee that loan. If the farmer goes out of business, we'll pay you back. Don't worry about it. That's our money that's doing that. So our money is propping up this system. The preys on animals preys on people. So we have some opportunities coming up, maybe. I mean, Washington is crippled right now, so it's hard to say what we can do. But most immediately, we have a budget reconciliation process. What's happening now, the House is proposing $230 billion to be cut from the U.S. Department of Agriculture budget. This impacts farmers, it impacts soil and water, it impacts people who need access to good food, it impacts our ability to know what's even in our food, what the hell's going on with avian flu, excuse my French. My buddy's Craig and I wanna fit in with him. So, they're not even monitoring avian flu right now. They fired the scientists. They're trying to desperately get them back because they realized, oh, whoops, we made a mistake. Our voices need to be heard right now in this budget process, making sure that we are not cutting scientists, we are not cutting science-based research into our food system, we are not cutting programs that impact farmers and their ability to stay on the land. Craig mentioned the federal funding freeze. That is impacting farmers right now. They're not hearing back about loans that they need to start their season right now. They're not hearing back about legal contracts they have with the government to be reimbursed for practices they've already put into place on their farms. We have a hotline since 1985. We're hearing from farmers every day who are saying, I've got $200,000 that I was expecting to be reimbursed because I have a legal binding contract and nobody will answer my call. Nobody will tell me anything. These folks won't be able to hang on to their land. They will lose their farms. And we talked about the number of farms that are left. We need these people on the land. We need programs that are putting new farmers on the land, young farmers. farmers of color who are coming from different traditions who have incredible solutions for us so that we can move away from this industrial agriculture that completely dominates what we do here in the US. That's the budget process. After that, we may or may not get a farm bill. They've been kicking it down the road for 2 years, you all probably know. The farm bill is every 5 years we get a new one, and it is the single biggest piece of legislation that deals with our food system. So we need to be active on that, calling our representatives, making sure that they're not just gutting that entire program, which ranges from, most of it is SNAP benefits, so people can access good food. A lot of people don't realize when we cut SNAP benefits, we're cutting farmer income. Because that money is going into local communities and supporting local farms. People can go to the farmer's market and use SNAP to purchase directly from farmers. So the farm bill is the next thing. Most likely they're going to kick that down the road again and give us another extension, and we'll be looking at it again next year. But I want to make a case for getting involved in state policy, because you all have probably studied Proposition 12 in California, which completely changed the pork industry, not just in California, but across the nation. That's going to be another, it's getting ready for another legal fight, but this is possible at the state level, I think, right now, particularly when we look at the dysfunction of the federal government. Looking to our states for what they can do is really crucial, I think, and state-based policy, especially in places like California, as we know, like in the auto industry, they can completely change things overnight for the entire country. So that's really crucial, and you all have an incredible program here at Harvard on getting involved in the local food system. Definitely vote with your fork, but like you say, you can't just go to Whole Foods and think like, oh, this is fun, this chicken is the best chicken. Go to your farmer's market, and there's lots of good ones around here, but definitely raise your voice too. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I'm sorry about the time. If anyone would like to raise any questions, and please include Jennifer in it too, because she's got a mic now, so we're on.
So now we're in the Q&A portion. Before we do, can we please thank our panelists?
I'll just ask quickly then to the people who can as well. So let's say we have a farmer who has these huge barns. What can they do with them? We've heard about the transformation concept, that maybe the barns are good for something, mushrooms. What happens when someone decides, I want out of this, but I don't want to leave my land? Is there a way to do something other than chickens or animals, for that matter, given the infrastructure that your colleagues have put so much, you did, and your other chicken growers have put so much money into?
It is, and I direct the contract grower transition program, the socially responsible agriculture project, and that's what we look at. We're looking, when we're transformational lives. Actually, I was the one who was the inspiration for the whole thing, right?
Awesome.
And unfortunately, those buildings are single-use buildings, and unfortunately, it's hard to find something that will replace the income. Even though that farmer is just treading water, with the chicken income, or maybe it's even below the poverty line, there's nothing really out there right now that will even come close. So you got the candidate to transition, and they asked me, transformation asked me what the perfect candidate was. I said, somebody with no debt. That was my situation. I could do whatever I wanted to. I sold hay in one, I got mushroom corn in another. And that's where the policy comes in. There was a great bill, Booker and somebody, and Jim, you chime in on this too, the Farm System Reform Act, where it basically would satisfy the debt that that farmer owed. So once you got those shackles off, the sky's the limit. You don't have to use those barns again. You can tear them down, and there's so much lumber and 10 other things. You can build a heck of a shop or whatever, or sell it and just do something entirely different.
So I'm curious, anytime there's an effort to reform either increase like the environmental outcomes or excuse me, food safety, farmer well-being, animal welfare, the refrain from industry and their cohorts in Congress that they make large donations to is that this is going to drive up costs for consumers, and admittedly that's like a compelling story, especially these last few years when grocery costs are sky high. But in that way, they're also paying consumers, many of whom are also living below the federal poverty line, against farmers, like in your instance, who have taken them the huge debt loads and are also living below the federal poverty line. So I'm curious, like, how do you overcome that argument and help people, consumers, understand that it's not me versus you, it's us versus Don Tyson and his family who's living large and continuing to make money. But I'm also just curious if you think the most recent rule update to the packages to stock cards is actually going to do anything, or if it's just window dressing on a ship that's already on its way down.
I'll answer the first question first, and I'll give you a good attorney answer. It depends. Who's sitting in D.C.? Those rules as far as going to the USDA. I mean, the lawyers could use the Package Stock Cards Act, but as far as going to the USDA, it could be very discretionary. I mean, it could wind up in a disc or if you file a complaint, you never see the light of day. So it depends. It has potential upside, absolutely. The boogeyman that you're talking about, the sky's falling, prices are going to raise up, it's already happening with the system in place. So what's the argument, right? So we already have inflation, and we had this system that we're supposed to be feeding the world. We're not even feeding everybody on my little road in Fairmont, North Carolina, called Butler Road. There are, I forget it's, percentage of children that's food insecure in my state. And yet we're the number one swine producing state, and we're the number two swine producing state, and the number one poultry producing state in the nation. So we're not even feeding our own people. So the industry has crafted that's a tug on somebody. When you go in the grocery store and it was $100 last year, and now it's $300. Pretty good argument, but like somehow we got to be willing to have the uncomfortable conversation. Like, I was telling a man, I have a dear friend now who was an environmentalist, and the way we met was she hated chicken farmers and I hated environmentalists. and we just kind of came together and became such good friends, so I learned a lot from her, and I get it now. Sitting across my living room floor from an animal rights factor, who would have thought that would happen, right? And what we find out is when we have the conversations, 98% of the things we talk about we have in common. So we forget the other 2%. We'll fight about that later. But let's work on that 98% right now. I don't know if I answered your question, but it is a boogeyman in the room, and the industry has crafted a very good narrative around that. But there's nothing backing it.
So, any other questions? So I actually have one last question for you, Craig. So my question is, there's a lot of hullabaloo about ultra-processed foods, and in terms of alternative proteins. And so I think it's interesting because when you really learn about what's going on in factory farms, it doesn't really appear as if the alternative, meaning meat, chickens in your case, would not also be considered ultra-processed. And so I'd like for you to, if you could speak on that and some concerns that people have in terms of going plant-based, going vegan, thinking that that's a better alternative, and thinking that eating meat or the way that animals are processed in a factory farm is natural and not processed.
Oh, well, like I said, there's nothing natural about cramming 30,000 chickens in 20,000 square feet and them sitting on their own feces and breathing in dust for 24/7. That's a great question. I just make it a rule, or try to make it a rule, not to eat anything I can't pronounce. So whether that's vegan or meat or whatever, that's kind of my rule. Because a lot of it really is, I mean, some of the meat alternatives really is ultra processed. It isn't really, I mean, maybe an animal's not getting killed to make that product. That's the upside to it. But is it really a more healthy choice? I don't know. I'm not a health expert. I just know I changed my diet and, don't take any meds anymore. So. But I can pronounce everything I eat.
Thank you. We have one more question.
Sorry. There might be one over there too. But we started the week with bird flu, talking about that. And you mentioned it very briefly, and you had said, I think, that the issue was mostly with hens, and because the chickens who are grown for slaughter, is that they're not there long enough? What's the reason, or have we seen bird flu in those kinds of flocks, and might we going forward,
Sure.
given as it spreads? What's the current status, and how might they be more or less susceptible than hens who lay eggs?
I don't think they're less susceptible because these things have been selectively bred for traits. The meat bird being the breast, the layer being for production. So when you mess with Mother Nature, to get some, you gotta give some. And what they give is their immune system is compromised. So one's just as susceptible to avian as the other. The difference is like these birds, sometimes 4, 5, 6 weeks, they're going to slaughter. Once that virus is introduced, it takes it from the time it's introduced to the time you see the clinical signs, probably about 2 weeks. So they very well could be sending birds with avian flu to the plant, and you not even know it because they haven't started dying yet. Where a hen, on the other hand, it takes her 20 weeks to get to the point where she's laying. So when it hits, the window's bigger for them to get infected, and then the egg prices go up because it takes another 20 weeks to replace them. When the meat chickens is just as fast as they can go.
And do we know what happens if someone eats a chicken who has avian influenza and was killed and put into the food supply? What do we know anything about that?
I joke with my wife, I said, I think you might get super bird powers, but I don't. Supposedly, if you cook it to a certain temperature, it kills the virus anyway, but I'd rather not, right?
Yeah, right. Well, it's like cook your eggs well so that you don't get avian influenza from the eggs. Who should be reassured by that?
Right.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. That's a good question.
Thank you. Do we have one more question?
That was one.
One more? Yes.
I'll just shout.
Well, I think.
Please. No, we want to.
Yeah,
Pick it up. I want to pick it up for a recording.
Strategy.
It's okay.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I'm just curious if this issue, do you think that this issue is particularly serious with Purdue, or it's industry-wide with other, the top 10 poultry producers?
Oh, no, it's not specific to Purdue. I was just happy to be a Purdue producer. I mean, Tyson, JBS, it's a carbon copy. If I got mad at Purdue and I wanted to go over here and race for Tyson, it would be like asking, did I want to drown or did I want to burn? Neither way is a good outcome.
Okay. Thank you so much again, Craig, Amanda. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming. And before I go, I just want to thank Professor Stilt, who's the faculty director of the Brooks McCormick Jr. Animal Law and Public Policy Program. So thank you. Yes. Animal Law Society, Miala, Callie. Of course, we want to thank Callie for helping putting this together. Merva, Bonnie's on the screen as well, Ann Linder, and Kelly McGill. And of course our fellows as well, and former fellow, but always a fellow in our hearts. And again, thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
If anyone needs a burrito for dinner.
I was sitting there thinking,
Yeah.
No, that's me. My God, growing up, I didn't think that.
I'm just gonna take a minute back. Yeah, the student ordinance.
So I
Sure, I think the other was that and one or two of the trades back to take one back to the probably enough. We'll take some to the there are only so many we can eat. Even this one?
I mean, I'm not sure. Nothing is fine. I mean, I love to do it differently.
No, so Neil's gonna take their first on the floor right there at the student. So we'll take one together, like that, yeah. We'll take it up. Yeah, I'll take it. They'll take it.
My baseball stuff.
He's never taking safety, just right. They're both killing right there. You know what I mean? Why change them not? Why carrots are not?
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of. Nice to meet you. You're good. Yeah,
Right person in the right circumstances.
I try to be.
Okay. Yeah, I can contact them on my own.
Okay, that's fair.
Usually they have a whole section on it. It's under contract for farmers and
Please take it whatever you.
Those ones, you said
Oh,
you were
yeah,
going to take
now
the time.
Is good? Good, great.
Can you help walk them over or? Help walk them over. Okay, so if you want to take back to them. Yeah, I should be good to take it. Yes. Kind of heavy. Oh, I mean, this is early, but it's my next thing is good, but also.